There is often a debate as to which is the biggest and most intense derby in English football. Some say Merseyside, others Manchester, while there's also an argument for the Tyne and Wear derby, or Chelsea versus Fulham. However, while those rivalries are mainly just geographical, there is one derby that is so much more than that. This is the story of the North London derby. Hello, my name is Richard, and in this video we're going to look back at the history of the rivalry between Arsenal and Spurs, and it's not just about geography. The first North London derby I attended was at Highbury in April 1982, and it was the most hostile atmosphere I'd ever experienced at a match. You could literally feel the pure hatred from their fans towards us, and it was pretty much reciprocated as well. I was on the North Bank that day, and there was a number of Spurs fans there, so of course it all kicked off. Nothing too unusual about that, you might think. I mean, this was the early 1980s, but I'd never witnessed anything like it before. Not with that level of intensity anyway. And it got me thinking, where did this hatred and rivalry come from? Surely it couldn't just be geographical. So let's take a quick look back at the history between these two clubs to find the answers. Tottenham Hotspur had been formed in 1882, 4 years before Arsenal, and they had initially played on Tottenham Marshes and Northumberland Park before moving to White Hart Lane in 1898. Of course, the two clubs were not local rivals back then, as Arsenal was still based south of the river in Plumstead. Spurs, as they were known, soon became a very successful non-league club, winning the Southern League in 1900, before a year later becoming the only non-league team to win the FA Cup since the formation of the Football League in 1888. Arsenal, or Woolwich Arsenal as they were known at the time, had been elected to the Football League Division 2 in 1893, the first southern-based club to do so, and had already been promoted to Division 1 long before Tottenham had even been elected to the Football League in 1908. So it wasn't until Spurs had won promotion in 1909 that the teams would meet in the league for the first time. Arsenal won that match 1-0 at the Manor Ground with a second-half goal from Walter Lawrence. But with Arsenal still playing in Plumstead, the match was just another London derby. And in fact, only 18,000 fans turned up to watch, not even the biggest crowd of the season. However, the feelings between the clubs would change in 1912 when Arsenal announced plans to move to North London. Spurs were extremely unhappy that another club was about to move into their territory, as Arsenal's proposed new home at Highbury was just 4 miles from White Hart Lane. Along with Clapton Orient, who were playing in Homerton at the time, and even Chelsea to the west, Spurs were the leading opposition to the move. So when the Football League approved it in 1913, the seeds were sown for this bitter rivalry that exists to this day. Spurs are resentful of Arsenal for infiltrating into their area, while Arsenal were resentful of Spurs for opposing the move in the first place. Now, unfortunately, Arsenal had been relegated in 1913. So there was to be no North London derby on the pitch until after football resumed following World War I, by which time Spurs' anger towards their new neighbours had been compounded by events in the summer of 1919. In the final season before the war, Spurs had finished bottom of Division 1. I know, hilarious, right? With Chelsea second bottom. However, the decision had been made to increase the size of Division 1 from 20 clubs to 22, so it was expected that no relegation would take place, as had been the case when the league had been increased in previous years. Indeed, it was agreed that Chelsea would keep their place in Division 1, but much to Spurs' surprise and anger, the other place was put to a vote. Now, Arsenal really had no right to claim that final place. We'd finished 6th in Division 2 in 1915. Although that was later amended to 5th after a mistake on the goal average that was used at the time to calculate when teams had finished level on points. But Arsenal chairman Sir Henry Norris was a very influential man, and he somehow managed to convince enough of the other club's chairmen to vote for Arsenal. Now, there is no suggestion that any money actually changed hands, although that cannot be ruled out completely, as Norris was later banned from football activities for financial misdemeanours. Unrelated to this incident, it should be said. Anyway, as a result of all of that, Spurs were relegated and Arsenal were promoted in their place. Hardly something that was going to help the already strained relationship between the clubs. Spurs took their sense of injustice out onto the pitch, winning the Division 2 title in 1920 and the FA Cup in 1921. Of course, Spurs' promotion finally brought about the first official North London derby, played on the 15th of January 1921 at White Hart Lane, which Spurs won 2-1. Although Arsenal won the return at Highbury 3-2 the following week in front of over 60,000 fans, Spurs had the better of those early meetings, and it wasn't until the end of the decade that Arsenal would gain the upper hand, a grip only briefly loosened since for a short time in the early 1960s. In fact, many of the meetings in that interwar period were brutal affairs as Spurs tried to take their revenge with late tackles, and there was even crowd trouble, setting the tone for many decades to come. So while this rivalry does indeed have some geographical content, it goes much deeper than that. Even to this day, Spurs fans are still bitter about the way Arsenal moved into their territory and took their place in Division 1, making Arsenal's glittering successes over the years all the more painful for them to bear as they look at their empty trophy cabinet. I mean, you've almost got to feel sorry for them. So yes, I think this proves without a doubt that the biggest and most intense derby in English football is the North London Derby. My name is Richard, and this has been the story behind the North London Derby. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like or a dislike if you're a Spurs fan, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll be back next time with some more interesting content like this, so join me for that one very, very soon.